was kind of good.
If you will, as a courtesy to those in attendance, please place your phone on silent or vibrate. Thank you. And we have Mr. Julian Falcon here this morning for our prayer. If you would come forward.
Lord, we just thank you for another day of life. We thank you for your mercy and your grace that you bestow upon us daily and moment by moment as it's needed, Lord God. We thank you for all of these that have gathered, and Lord God, these that are going to come before the Planning Commission, these that are a part of the Planning Commission, and everyone that is here today, Lord God, that you would just give them the mind of Christ, Lord God, that they would be able to direct the affairs of this city, Lord God, in the planning. And Lord God, that we just give you the glory, especially at this time of the year where we celebrate your birth. And we just thank you, Lord God, because we believe that you're not only with this city, but with this nation. It is, in fact, one nation under God. And we thank you for that. In Jesus' name, amen.
Please remain standing for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. We have two items on the consent agenda that we're going to move to the regular agenda. So what remains on our consent agenda would be the minutes for our meeting of November 21st.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
So we're going to begin on the first replat of Track 62, Section 1, Fusel Farm Tracks. Request for approval of the first replat of Track 62, Section 1, Fusel Farm Tracks, generally located outside the San Angelo municipal corporate limits and within the city's extraterritorial jurisdiction, ETJ, at the intersection of Herbert Road and Lorraine Lane on 12.73 acres.
Permission to proceed?
Please.
Members of the Commission, good morning. For the record, David Stallworth, Principal Planner. And I'd like to call your attention to the first replat of Track 62, Section 1, Fusel Farm Tracks, as read into the record by the Commission Chair. The approximate 8.63 acre partition is out of Track 62, which consists of an overall 12.73 acres. It's located southwest of the intersection of Herbert Road and Lorraine Lane, and it's also located outside the city limits within the San Angelo ETJ. Therefore, it's not subject to any land use or zoning regulations. It is, however, subject to a comprehensive plan, and it is also subject to subdivision per interlocal agreement per state statute. Slide number 2 gives you a rendering of the proposed replat, which is indicated in bold black. It's going to be itemized as Track 62A. As this was indicated on the plat face and also subject to CCNRs, it is single-family residential. Therefore, it's subject to special notification. As such, 8 notices were mailed out on 10/31. 8 revised notices were again mailed out on November 10th. In either case, no responses either in favor of or in opposition to the request were received by staff. With this in mind, staff is recommending approval of the first replat of Track 62, Section 1, Fusel Farm Tracks, subject to one condition of approval. It should be noted that because this thing is subject to private CCNRs, this approval does not preempt those CCNRs. So this is just for your consideration. This concludes my presentation. Are there any questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Is there any public comment?
Good morning, the Commission. Herb Hooker with SKG Engineering. I believe this one just got pulled off the consent agenda because a public hearing was required, but I'd be happy to answer any questions or address comments you might have.
I don't have any.
Thank you.
Any further comments?
I'll move to approve as stated.
Have somebody coming.
Oh, okay.
Please state your name.
David Ramirez.
Yes, sir.
First of all, I'm track 61, next door to 62. And first of all, we have restrictions there that we're supposed to have restrictions there. So when I moved there, we had restrictions. We fought to have restrictions again in 98 or 99. Matter of fact, the ex-owner of track 61 was representing us for the restrictions. So she knew the restrictions, first of all. So she's now trying to subdivide her property after she sold her property. So that's two owners in that property. So she, forgive me. Like I said, she subdivided that property without letting us know. And our restriction says we're not supposed to subdivide our property. So if she can do it, and y'all won't let her do it, I guess I'm gonna do my property too like that, I guess. But I'm not gonna do it because I respect the restrictions that we have. I respect my neighbors. You know, how can you sell your property, then you try to subdivide it afterwards? You know, that don't make sense. You know, I can keep on going, but our neighbors, they don't accept that either. I wish most of them were here, but they have to work. I hope y'all do the right thing and decide to just avoid this, or whatever y'all need to do, because, you know, we've been at it since October to try to deny this for a subdivision. But it's up to y'all.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
Could we get your name for the record?
Is there a deed restriction on the books that show that?
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
indicating your staff report, there is a restriction 4, subchapter 7, and it itemizes that restriction on it.
Is there any further comment? Discussion?
Is staff recommending approval?
Yes.
Staff is recommending approval because it meets the technical requirements of the land division and the land development and subdivision ordinance. We don't take into consideration any private issues regards to CCNRs. However, I note to the board that this subdivision may or may not preempt that.
So there's legal recourse for the adjacent owners if they wish to pursue that.
That is correct.
Further discussion? No. Okay. Looking for a motion of some kind? You didn't finish it.
Is my,
You didn't finish it.
okay. Everyone, Ryan, a motion?
It's the city's guidelines. I'll make a motion to approve.
If this is approved, then he can come back with legal action, correct? Okay.
We don't take into consideration their private CCNRs.
The city is not party to
Right.
private covenants and restrictions, so their legal recourse is the court. Absolutely.
Met all the requirements of the city guidelines.
Yes, sir.
Then I'll second that.
We have a first and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed with no? Says 6-0. Next, we have River Lots 12, 13, and 14, Fort Concho Addition. A request for approval of the first replat in River Lots 12, 13, and 14, Fort Concho Addition generally located on the northwest side of Rio Concho Drive, approximately 775 feet east of the intersection of Rio Concho Drive and South Magdalene Street on 2.216 acres.
John James, Director of Planning and Development Services. As you mentioned, this is a replat. You can see there the area identified along Rio Concho. It currently sits a private home and a funeral home. You may have driven by that on your way here this morning. This is the proposed replat of that area, creating those two lots. You can see one of the things that may be the only point of discussion between us and the applicant was whether or not to require a sidewalk. Staff is recommending the provision of a sidewalk along the street of this property, and just wanted to show some of the surrounding area. While there is a trail along the river, and then the sidewalk, if you're walking down the street, you can take a sidewalk that brings you around here. That both of those lead into this little park area. However, to get from that park area back to the street sidewalk, which starts here at the bridge, there's stairs that lead up, making it not ADA compliant. A second factor, and we'll see some pictures in just a second, but these green areas here show heavy foot traffic. You can see well-worn paths along the street, indicating that people use that significantly for pedestrian activity, which is yet another reason we are recommending a sidewalk. Finally, as I mentioned, there's a sidewalk existing out in this direction, and then at the bridge going into downtown, there are sidewalks as well. So this plat, constructing sidewalks would come very close to completing a gap in our existing system. You can see here the footpath there along the yellow dashed lines, and another one here. Again, if you drive by that, you can see that that is a really good example of a well-worn path. Sometimes it's kind of hard to see those. This one is, it's clear that they're being used significantly. And again, carrying through the whole site as well. Staff does recommend approval of the replat, subject to two conditions. One is to provide a tax certificate. The other is the construction of the sidewalk, or at least, as you see, a financial guarantee. They do have the option of a variance, which I believe they may be asking you for a variance from that sidewalk requirement. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
Is the sidewalk being required on only the unimproved sections, or is it going through the parking lot as well?
It would be throughout the site.
Okay.
I think there would be an option, and I think our engineering staff maybe can speak to that. We generally don't recommend allowing the parking lot to be used for a number of reasons, but ensuring that it's ADA compliant and that a wheelchair, strollers or motorized wheelchairs can use them properly, it's preferred to actually construct a sidewalk.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you. We'll open it for public comment.
Herb again with SKG. Just wanted to reiterate that this sidewalk isn't a condition according to the subdivision regulations, which requires sidewalks or streets, pavement widths less than 36 feet. This is actually a requested sidewalk by the city staff. I think the question Travis had about a sidewalk through the parking area, that's not done. I mean, you see it all over the city. You have handicap ramps that go to a street with the expectation that they can use a paved street surface as a sidewalk to get from ramp to ramp. So I don't want that to be a consideration. So if we need to, when you make the motion, if that needs to be included in the motion, I don't think we need to go cut the pavement and put an actual concrete sidewalk in. The owner would like to speak to you about the situation, and then I might have a couple more comments after he gets done. So, okay, thank you.
Good morning.
James Campbell, owner, Robert Massey Funeral Home, which is where this is all located. I'm not opposed to doing some work with the city, but there's a lot of gaps in here that the city is leaving. I feel that there is a existing sidewalk that goes, and he pointed out this blue line right here. I don't know how to do all that fancy stuff. It goes around behind the funeral home. People use that every day. I mean, there's park walkers, there's joggers, there's elderly from across the street at Rio Concho coming across. For the last 6 years that I've owned the funeral home and for the whole entire 19 years that I've worked there, this has been the system. Never before has the city cared about handicap and what they're gonna do. Those bridges and those sidewalks and those walkways have been there in effect for 20 years. So, I recently redid the section right here in yellow. It's an island. I spent about $100,000 beautifying the island. I put in a crushed granite. Is that correct? What he said, a sidewalk. There are handicap ramps at both sides. They told me they were built to handicap specifications. Some people use those. Some people use the parking lot. The main point I'm trying to say is if you're requiring me to do sidewalks, because right now I own the property. After I split the property, I'll own the property. So you're requiring me to do something that the city has not done in 20 years. 6 years ago when I bought the property, I contacted the Parks Department about putting signs and handicapping that and doing that and never received any interest from the city at all. I mean, I got a phone call back. They didn't seem to think it was a problem then. But now that I'm going to pay for it, or now that you're making me pay for it, it becomes a requirement. So I'm not saying we shouldn't do something over there. I'm saying that if I have to do something, excuse me, I think the city should, over here where this park is and there's the heavy foot traffic, the city ought to upgrade that area also. Thank you.
Thank you.
Another couple of quick words. I guess you got the gist of what Mr. Campbell was saying. You know, we do a lot of plats and replats, and there's always conditions imposed on approval of those, and we understand that, and we understand that in this situation, and I think you'll agree that he understands that a sidewalk is a really good idea in this location. My concern is that the existing city facilities tying into the bridge over there, there's essentially like a chat walkway. This was on the consent agenda, so I wouldn't really expect y'all to go by and visit it like you do the other, the other items on the agenda. I don't know what authority this planning commission might have to get some action out there. This would really be the ideal time to have the city complete the sidewalk from the end of Mr. Campbell's property, from the west side over there, over to the bridge. On the west side of the bridge.
On the screen. Touch the screen and draw.
With your fingers. With your finger,
Okay,
you can draw.
right here? Yeah, we got it. As it comes off the bridge, and there's actually stairways that come down in this relatively nice park area down here, and it's not handicap accessible whatsoever. And understanding the amount of money and effort that the city's put in to the Riverwalk and walkways all the way from Bell Street west through town, I find it hard to believe that this has been ignored. And I mean, if there's any way for y'all to possibly have the planning department bring this up before the city council or something, to have someone finish connecting this sidewalk to what Mr. Campbell is going to be required to do, that's what I'm asking for. I mean, the city already has 2 sidewalks going along the back of the property and then along the River Drive, and no handicap accessibility to these. And it's incredible to me that this situation's existed, like Mr. Campbell said, for over 20 years, and nobody's really addressed it, and now he's being required to put the sidewalk in. He understands that it's a good thing, but we really need the city to complete their portion and make it handicap accessible if they want, but at least connect the sidewalk over to the bridge. two blocks west of here is Concho Street.
Speak into the mic, please.
And I think you get the gist of what I'm trying to say, and I'm hoping that y'all have some authority to get some action on the city doing what we feel is their responsibility to complete this portion of the sidewalk.
So is there a sidewalk that runs along the street from the boundary of the Massey site over to the bridge, from there over?
It's essentially a dirt walkway.
Yeah.
I'm guessing right in this area for maybe 100 feet, it's about 2-foot wide walkway.
And what you're saying is that there are steps that lead from that makeshift walkway down into the park,
Yeah,
correct?
down into this. It's kind of like a sunken garden park
Okay.
area. It's really pretty nice.
Yep.
And I know it's utilized. If you'll look at this area over here, that's a retirement community.
Yes.
That utilizes this park area all the time, and they could well benefit from some handicap accessibility. And like I said, hopefully y'all can do something and get some action going on this. I know Mr. Campbell's tried to get some stuff done, and now that he's being required to put a sidewalk in, we think it's only fair that the city goes ahead and does what should have been done many years ago as far as accessibility coming off the east end of the bridge there. It would be a good time for them to ensure some handicap accessibility too, but that would be a little bit bigger project than just connecting to the sidewalk that he's gonna be doing, so.
Can I assume that your request is contingent on us making Mr. Campbell do the sidewalks? Your request of the city?
Yes,
Okay.
I would think that y'all would vote for the sidewalk. I mean, if there's opportunity to avoid that, and we've talked with city engineering about the possibility of continuing his decomposed granite sidewalk or putting a chat sidewalk in there, which by National Park standards, it's a firm and stable base, which is a requirement for the handicap accessibility. City engineering department doesn't like that. They think it's too high maintenance, which in cross drainage situations might be. We don't really have that situation here. I didn't really approach y'all on the possibility of doing a decomposed granite or a chat type walkway in lieu of the city spec concrete walkway that they're asking for. If y'all would look at that option, we'd be happy to do that. It's kind of y'all's call. I know this, like I said, it was on the consent agenda, so y'all probably didn't give as much thought as y'all have on some of the items on the regular agenda. I'll be happy to answer any questions. If y'all would approve a chat sidewalk like is in the park area down by the golf course that has been there for 20, 25 years, we would love to have that option. It hadn't really been discussed here, and I don't know if anybody from engineering would want to talk to you about their disapproval of a decomposed granite type walkway or a chat type walkway as opposed to the concrete city spec walkway. But if that would be an option that you would look at, we would love to do the chat type walkway.
Any further questions, Mr. Hooker? Okay. Is there any other discussion? Thank you.
Good morning, Lance Overstreet from the Engineering Department. I'm quite familiar with this area as we evaluated a lot of the sidewalks and the trails in this area with our MLK Transportation Enhancement Project. And that has grant funding, and in that project, we were looking at creating multi-use trails. And there are strict requirements on the multi-use trails. And the city has really started evaluating the chat trails and actually trying to bring those up to the proper multi-use standards. And so if it is a chat trail that's designed to be multi-use, it has to be at least 10 feet wide by code with TxDOT and have a 2-foot clear zone. So you have to have a 14-foot wide zone there to actually consider it as a multi-use trail. In this area, as you approach the bridge, there wasn't that kind of width. And so we actually, as engineering, are doing a dedicated bike lane, so that way at some point we can provide a designated sidewalk area And this way, those two different uses can be separated out, in which case we have a little more flexibility on those widths. And so that was one thing that we had looked at in terms of our project with MLK. There was not the funding to do the sidewalk portions of this. We were really focused on kind of the trails on the project that the city currently has going on. And there will be some improvements that are taking place to the trail system a little further down on the next bridge and then going to Bell Street. The use of Chat Trail, though, in the right-of-way has created some problems because the Street and Bridge Department, of course, the Chat Trail does require higher maintenance, but we definitely, on the sidewalks, are pushing to keep those ADA compliant. And so the trail that is there, I did go out and look at what was put in place there as far as the Chat. It does have pavers that stand up above and raised up above the Chat Trail on the sides, which creates tripping hazards. The other thing, too, is it meanders fairly sharply through there, which also, too, can cause some problems in terms of navigating for other uses. And so the use of the concrete is in our spec as a maintenance issue for the right-of-way because it does have a lower maintenance. And so not that we would not consider possibility of a Chat, but it would have to be brought up to that multi-use kind of standard. And the problem is that I believe that there's not enough room to get that 14-foot width through that area with the trees and with that, and the cost to go through and redo that versus the 3 to 5 foot sidewalk is probably going to be realistically about the same. So
has the city looked at doing the sidewalks with other money that will be coming forward, or?
We have been looking at that area. The bigger concern that we have is the bridges have some issues in those areas because there isn't really a wide enough spot across the bridges for pedestrian. And so we have been looking at that. There is some sidewalk and some other areas across that bridge that are in need of some maintenance and repair. And so we have actually been looking at the possibility of a project to do some of that work so that way then the sidewalk can then complete it. So.
Any further questions?
Well, just a quick one. So if you were to build a sidewalk that connects, right? So one of the things we always discuss up here is everybody wants sidewalks, nobody wants to pay for them, right? And also, if somebody's going to pay for them, we want to make sure they're going someplace. Makes perfect sense. So if we're going to try to connect these sidewalks, are we talking about some city-owned property, and then Mr. Campbell also owns some property, but the expectation is that he does all of it?
No, he would only be responsible for the area along the red, so from.
Right.
His property boundary.
I can't draw
Right,
on
his
mine.
boundary, right.
Yeah.
That's where I'm going. So if, in a perfect world, if he was to do this tomorrow, his sidewalk would literally go nowhere until the city decided, hey, we're gonna meet up with his. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, but I would add to that every city that implements a new sidewalk requirement will say, the first sidewalk you build doesn't go anywhere.
Right, no,
and the second one doesn't go anywhere until the third one meets up.
I love sidewalks, I get it. What I want to see is, where I was going with that was, is there a timeline? Is there any plans whatsoever to finish this project 100%? If Mr. Campbell spends the money, right, which I feel like, I feel like he wants it. I feel like he agrees with, A, it needs to be done, and B, I think it would look great. I walked the property yesterday, and I think what I did yesterday was when you go down those steps into that park, not everybody wants to walk a trail, right? Some people just want to get from A to B, right? And so this old Manhattan boy can tell you that the shortest distance between, 2 points is great. So not everybody wants to just go for a walk. So is there a time frame for this thing to be finished if Mr. Campbell does his part? Is he going to be doing it and then it's going to be 10 years or 20 before, because it's been 20 since we've even discussed it? Do you guys have a time frame of when we're going to look at completing the sidewalks if he does his part?
There's not a specific time frame, but I will say that one of the key factors that we're looking at as we look at sidewalk projects to move forward with city funds is completion of gaps. And so if he
Becomes a
goes in and
priority.
builds this sidewalk, I can't guarantee that this would be done immediately, but it will raise the likelihood significantly that this would be chosen as a future project in the near term because it shortens that gap. And especially if that's your direction we're hearing, then
Well,
we
it
will
just
definitely
makes-
take that forward for consideration.
Do we all agree that doesn't it make sense that if we're going to discuss a citizen having to have that kind of renovation to his property, doesn't it make sense that he's doing it for a reason and a purpose?
Yes.
Right.
And I think
we
that's our
make-
job.
Can we make this contingent on him adding the sidewalks when the city does their part? And also, another part of that question, can we grant the variance? Does he have to make the variance before we can grant him? I think it's ludicrous for him to have to do the sidewalks across the parking lot. That is dumb.
No, that's ridiculous.
No,
Yeah, that's
that doesn't need to
ridiculous.
happen.
So can we revise that part of this? Number one. And number two, can we make him not have to do this sidewalk until the city does their part?
Across the parking lot.
Oh, that is really ridiculous.
Well, it's perfectly free
Yeah.
to tell people to look both ways before crossing
Yeah.
the street.
Yeah.
I mean, you gotta have common sense.
Good morning,
sir.
Russell with SKG. I believe there's also a mechanism the city has used on city streets to where you contribute some money to a fund, and then within that 7-year or some time period, that the city would use that money for this specific street improvements, but they could be used, I would think a sidewalk could be considered similarly as the streets would be. So maybe he contributes what the amount of an estimate for the sidewalks that would be outside the pavement areas.
I don't disagree with that. The problem is that time frame is very short. And if the funds aren't used, it goes into the general fund, which I think is ridiculous. So I'm not gonna agree to make him put
You know,
in.
actually, there is a financial guarantee option that you could make as the condition instead of requiring the construction today. It's 7 years, but it doesn't go into the general fund. If the city hasn't used it for that intended purpose within 7 years, it goes back to the property owner. I can't speak to the street fund, but for this,
Street fund, after a short amount of time, it goes back into the general fund.
It
Mr.
goes
Ken?
back to the property owner. I have no problem with
Yeah, I
that.
like the guarantee, personally. I think
Do
that's a
you-
good solution.
Do you understand what
Mr.
they're
Campbell.
talking about?
They're talking about making me put up a guarantee and then not do anything until the city does their part. I'd like to point out over here, there's a driveway that comes off the duplex, the residence, at an angle. And so I think when we get to that point, are they gonna make me do the driveway straight or tear out that whole bunch of concrete? And so, also what he was talking about to his other thing, my property ends right here. We're thinking that was 270 feet between the two there. The third point is that I don't know exactly what the situation of these sidewalks is in the back here. At one time, that was all blocked off because it was all falling down in this parks back there. So they've taken all the fences down. I don't know if they've been doing work, but I think you should be aware of the maybe scope of the project, not just we're going to put some sidewalk across that. It may be a larger project or a more comprehensive project than just what we've been talking about with sidewalks. So, but I'm okay. I know people walk there. I live behind the convention center here and walked to work for 2 years. I know what the trail is, you know. I cut through the parking lot here and, you know, you don't go around when you're walking, you go straight, you know. So,
It's bad.
like I said, I know there's something and I'm willing to work with the city. I just didn't want to feel like I'm going to put, you know, I think it's 30 feet a foot for sidewalks or something like that. So I don't want to put, you know, $15,000, $20,000 up and then still have this gap right here on the red part with no, you know, there's still going to be that, so.
Right. That's why I asked if there was a time frame, if there was a plan. I mean, because I agree that sidewalks need to start, and it's one of my biggest things is sidewalks, and we sit up here week after week, and everybody wants a variance from the sidewalk because nobody wants to pay for it because it's not going anywhere. But there's got to be a point to where you say, okay, we've got to do something about a sidewalk. I mean,
Well, and what,
we have to start.
What this gentleman was talking about is over here behind, these are all chat or crushed granite sidewalks, from.
Right.
So, that's why I did the improvements to the island there. I did that yellow spot right there. I tried to blend in with what the city's doing, and then, of course, less than a year later, they're telling me, tear it out and put concrete in. I'm like, okay. So anyway, just, I think y'all are smart. Y'all make a good decision. I'm willing to work with y'all. We just need to figure out what all of us are doing together as a team to get it done.
Well, and I think you did a great job on that area. I saw it yesterday and walked around there, and I thought it looked great.
Thank you.
I realize that Mr. Thomas is here from the city council, and he may or may not be able to address what I'm fixing to talk about, but I know currently, by watching all those meetings, that they are having to really stretch funds for parks right now because there's requests all over town for new restrooms and blah, blah, blah. And it could be a while before they could get to a for this right here to happen. And I don't know whether you want to address that or not, Harry, but.
Harry Thomas. Sammy, I wasn't going to talk, but that's okay. It's certainly not going to happen anytime in the near future. I mean, It's not in the plans right now. And it's certainly not enough money to do this particular project. Mr. Campbell is right. When we talk about his property and what we want to try to do, the vision for this is to extend that sidewalk back across the river. That sidewalk that's on that bridge is going to have to be reconstructed anyway. There's 2 spots on that, and I'm sure you saw that yesterday. 2 spots on that bridge where the water drains down into the river that are collapsed. They're going to have to fix that sometime sooner than later on that particular one. I would say that what Russell said may make some sense to this particular panel. And of course, Mr. Campbell knows that if he's not satisfied with what goes on here, he can always bring it to the council. We don't want to deal with it if we don't have to, though. That's why you guys have been appointed. That's why Terry's my representative on this council, on this commission. But we are probably not going to address this particular portion of this, I would say, at least in this fiscal year. And I don't know if there's dollars out there. There's certainly not dollars in the park fund to address this. So it's going to have to come out of whatever we may do on Rio Concho from the street portion of it, as Lance said. So I can't see this happening at least until this time next year and maybe beyond that.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I knew from watching your meetings that this issue, it was probably going to be a while before any money could be used for this purpose, and that's the only reason I brought that up.
Right, and you're right. But again, there are people that utilize the trail system, but there are significant numbers of people that walk right there along Rio Concho, right in front of Mr. Campbell's property. I mean, if you can go out there and look, Joe, I know you saw it yesterday when you were there. That's a worn path there. Been doing it for years. Yep. You can sit there and watch people walk every day right in front of his property, right across his parking lot. So the sidewalk's got to be put in at some point in time in the future. It's got to be for everybody that's concerned. And so that we meet all the federal standards for ADA stuff, it's got to be a sidewalk that can be utilized by everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's just an easier sell, if you will, to the citizen who's spending the money if they know they're doing it as part of an entire.
Exactly.
Right? It's all encompassing. They're part of it. It's an easier sell, and it certainly makes us sleep better at night when we know that we made a decision. Somebody's going to be spending money on something that makes sense, right?
Good morning, Commission. Joe Mangrum, Assistant City Engineer. So the kind of different options here for the financial guarantee, I'll expand on that a little bit. So there's, kind of different options in the subdivision ordinance when you're platting property, like what they're doing here, replatting. One is to build the improvements prior to your plat being recorded. There's another option that the financial guarantee is that they put up funds, either a letter of credit, a bond, or cash to the city. The city releases the plat, and then they have 3 years. The applicant has 3 years to complete the improvements, or the city has those funds to draw on to complete them if they default. There's actually a third option that's not very often used, that is the actual deferment of the improvements, where the applicant provides the city the funds in a cash, and then the city has 7 years to use those funds as part of a larger scheme of improvements, or those funds default back to the applicant if the city doesn't use those in 7 years. Kind of my recommendation here, I think everyone's agreement that there's a need for a sidewalk here, and if the time frame, especially closing the gap here, is an issue, and it is, we recognize that, then I would recommend possibly using the deferment option to allow the city the time to generate the funds or come up with the funds to complete that gap. And that way Mr. Campbell's completing his portion, and the city's not having to foot the bill for that entire portion. One other thing I'd like to address is the parking lot portion of the sidewalk. The city does have standards, and it's concrete. We recognize that the cost of tearing out asphalt, if it's in good condition, doesn't necessarily need to be done. However, in this case, there's parking that comes right up to the back of the curb, and I think that may be addressed as part of this, that parking would have to be restriped to allow room for the sidewalk, because if cars were parked there, then essentially there wouldn't be that room for the sidewalk. But, I guess the city, engineering-wise, we really don't like the idea of using existing asphalt pavement, but we recognize that if to get, the project done, and if it needs to be done, then we recognize that we can approve situations like that where using existing asphalt pavement for a sidewalk. Are there any questions for those options or anything?
No, thank you for the clarification.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Mr. Campbell?
Ron, I have a question. If we're looking at the deferment option, how is the financial component of that established?
Actually, it's identically to a financial guarantee where the applicant's engineer comes up with a quantity. We have some regionally established prices per square foot or per linear foot, and then the applicant's engineer provides the estimate, and the city agrees to it, and then they provide the funds for that.
I think I agree with the deferment option because it aligns the city with the property owner. If the city doesn't do it in 7 years, he gets his money back. So,
is there any kind of interest paid on that money that's just laying there dead?
No, sir. No interest. It's just held until either used or deferred back. And actually, so what this is saying, so this one is actually referring to the performance guarantee, that it's 18 months with an additional 18 months extension, and that's the situation where the applicant would be completing the improvements. Typically, we don't even list the deferment as an option because a lot of times the city may not have plans, and especially if it's more generally used for streets or water sewer improvements, the applicant has to do those in order to complete the project. But in a situation like this where maybe it's just closing the gap, the deferment might be a good option.
Mr. Campbell, if you'll come up, please. Before we go to a motion and a vote, how do you feel about that? The 7-year
Well, I think that
deferred?
the scope of the project is, I'm gonna give you upwards of $200,000, and you're gonna hold on to it for 7 years, not make any plans, and give me $200,000 back, which is totally unreasonable. I mean, the financial guarantee where I've got like a pledge from the bank or something where I'm not out any money, it's maybe my credit that's taking a hit maybe for 3 years or something. I would offer that, maybe go ahead and give me the variance, split the property. As soon as there's a city plan to do that, I'm happy to go forward with any of these options. But it seems silly to me to put that on me when there's not any options to do that. And you heard him, it's not gonna be this fiscal year, maybe next year, maybe 3, maybe 7 years? That's a long time for deposit.
Yeah, I think the problem with the financial guarantee scenario, Mr. Campbell, is that after 3 years, if it isn't done, it's forfeited back to the city. The deferment option would,
Money
if
up
the
front.
city, but if the city doesn't do their side, their end,
7 years, no interest,
but if they don't do the work, you get your money back.
no interest.
Right.
I can't possibly, I wouldn't possibly agree with a business owner doing that. I would never ask a business owner to do that.
We'd possibly like to have the option on what to choose. The deferment option that came up in this discussion, if you read the verbiage, allows for the city to use those funds within half a mile of the project area on any project that supposedly benefits the project area. And it was set up for roadways.
Yeah.
So you could get money, so a developer could do the deferment money that it would cost to improve his roadway, and the city could use it for any roadway within half a mile that would access his property. It's a very unusual method for financial guarantee, and it hadn't been used that often with the city, and I've never seen it used in a sidewalk situation. We could explore it a little bit more and see if the city was willing to do that. It doesn't sound like Mr. Campbell wants to do that, so we'd really like the option of either providing the sidewalk or the financial guarantee, just like any other infrastructure improvements in conjunction with a replat. So.
If I may also, when he was talking about taking out some of my parking spots, you're gonna take out one handicap and probably 20 parking spots if you're gonna make that go across my parking lot. So,
I think he was talking about just restriping the parking, not actually putting the improvements in.
right, but he's talking about restriping, moving the stripes back. Is that what you're actually saying?
I think he's just saying that you can't have parking spots through a
Right, that's
designated
20 parking
walkway.
spots. Because
Okay.
there's striped parking lots, and there's a, whoop. Yes, ma'am?
I didn't see a detail good enough for that.
I just have to aim it this way.
Ah,
Very logical.
that's very good.
Actually, you like that one? Actually, the aerial is actually better.
Oh, yeah, I see what he's saying, yeah.
So what they're talking about is right here, there's like 20, 18 parking
go
spots.
this way.
And then there's, all the rest of the parking lot is striped,
Yeah.
and there's a drive-through there. So if you're gonna make me move those back at least 14 feet or whatever,
It's still handicap accessible. All they've got to do is go around the back of the stripes and go through the parking
Well,
lot.
let me point out that
It doesn't have to be an arrow straight.
those spots are in the public right-of-way, and so any future improvements on the side is gonna require those to be moved back
They're gonna be moved
anyway.
no matter what.
Since they weren't constructed on their property, but were constructed out into the city's right-of-way.
unless we're gonna, I can understand something for, making Rio Concho wider, but, for a sidewalk, just to lose those spaces is a poor trade to me, but,
We're talking about utilizing the existing drive in the parking lot as a handicap accessibility route. They're coming in off the street like this. We're just talking about going back behind them. The bigger problem is going to be this tree right here, because we're essentially going to be constructing a 5-foot wide sidewalk, 3 foot off the back of the curb, so we've only got 8 foot to deal with. So there's going to be a couple of challenges anyway in getting the sidewalk in there.
ADA compliant didn't allow
Also,
you to
Joe
traverse through the
was talking
parking lot,
about
though, does it?
cutting out pavement to put in concrete, and I haven't seen that happen. Maybe he has an example that I haven't seen of actually cutting pavement and replacing it with concrete.
No, I said I'd agree with using that.
Okay,
Using
thank you,
it,
misunderstood on that. So, really, we'd like the option to either
absolutely.
construct the sidewalk or have the typical financial guarantee, the 18 months with an extension of 18 months if necessary.
So Mr. Campbell is okay with constructing the sidewalks up to the parking lot and then asking for a variance across the parking lot of the sidewalk?
If that's the terminology you want to use, I
I
don't.
think, as I understood it, it wouldn't be a variance to the sidewalk, it would be requiring an ADA compliant path across the pavement without having to replace it with concrete.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So you don't have to pull out the pavement or anything. If we can get an ADA compliant path behind those parking stripes, which it appears that we can without a problem, should be good to go.
I don't have a problem with whatever y'all are, however that works out, so I don't have to pull pavement out. What I have a problem with is putting sidewalks in there and having a 270-foot gap or 230-foot gap that the sidewalk goes to the middle of their chat, the city's chat, and then the city's never going to do anything with that. Or is my fear, 7 years from now when they do a project, they're going to make me go and say, well, that's not in code, Mr. Campbell. You're going to have to meet our sidewalk specifications and make me spend more money to finish up my sidewalks according to what the project is going to be in the future. I'm saying if we're going to do sidewalks, let's partner up, let's do sidewalks. If we're not going to do them for 7 years, I don't want to do them for 7 years. You know, I mean, I get that there's like I said, I'm willing to work, but I don't think that I should be allowed to, or I should be made to put my sidewalks in, and then the city may and or may not do sidewalks. And then there's still that gap that's handicap and ADA and all that stuff. And I know what'll happen. I'll put sidewalks in, and in 7 years from now, I'll be in front of y'all, and they're saying, your sidewalks don't meet the new current guidelines. You're gonna have to tear those out and put new ones in, is my fear. So
I would be willing to make a motion to that effect, exactly what he said. That he doesn't have to put the sidewalks in until the city steps up, does their part.
that would be my first golden option, yes. You know, and I don't mind putting up a little money, or a little bond, but I definitely don't want to put money out of my pocket to the city to hold for 7 years. That's,
We haven't really tried this before, but would there be the possibility of him providing a performance guarantee for the construction of the sidewalk contingent upon the city building their portion of the sidewalk? We're only talking 3 years then. If you look at the 18 months, plus a possible 18-month extension, in effect, if the city doesn't build their portion of the sidewalk connecting his west property line with the bridge within that 3-year period, that you would be essentially granting a variance that he doesn't have to do the sidewalk. And that way we can go ahead and get the, he can do the performance bond, we can get the replat filed, which is why we're here. And then we'll wait to see if the city can come through. The amount of funds that we're looking at from the city's perspective is quite a bit less than what the city is requiring Mr. Campbell to spend on his sidewalk. We're talking 270 feet for the city. He's over 300 feet on his part, so.
I know we're beating this one pretty good. Throw another idea out. The most foot traffic seems to be between the bridge and Mr. Campbell's property. We do see foot traffic here, but why don't we just kind of do a little trade, if you will, and have Mr. Campbell build the segment between the bridge and up to his property now, because that seems to be the big point of discussion, and then if and when the city ever does their stuff, they can come finish out along this trail here and tie into the city sidewalks. And now we don't have a gap per se is significant. We don't have two gaps, we only have one gap.
Right,
That's not a bad idea.
I'm not sure
I like that idea. If they'll
what
let
the
us do it.
requirement is to build an off-site. I guess one thing I want to point out is that, the subdivision ordinance is intended as the subject property develops, they have to meet these certain requirements. If this was not city property, if this was privately owned, you can't put a condition on, this applicant building sidewalk contingent upon the next guy doing it. We understand that the city's, there's a footpath here and the city hasn't done it. But if it was not the city and if we were in a blank slate situation, you can't put a condition on this guy doing it based on what his adjoining properties going to do. So,
His last option wasn't contingent on that.
right. And so also the from what I understand, and I'll have to look at the ordinance, to clarify, but the 7-year deferment, I think from what I understand is a cash deposit to the city, and then the city uses those. The 3-year performance agreement is the bond letter of credit option. So I don't think there's a bond option for the extended 7-year period.
But realize this is all in city right-of-way anyway. It's not in his property, it's not on private property, it's all in city right-of-way. So where you build it is irrelevant because it's all currently in city right-of-way. And it's really not a development. This is an existing conditions. It's existed like this for a long, long time.
Russell was.
I will clarify that just to say that under our ordinances, anytime you're splitting property, that is considered a development. I understand it's not as we normally think, but that's the one trigger state law gives us as what is development and when we can require streets and water and sidewalks and all of that.
Nothing changed, we wouldn't be talking about it.
Right.
Mr. Campbell, are you in agreement with Mr. Gully's last suggestion?
He doesn't remember.
So you're saying that I would build the sidewalk from the end of my property here to here, and then when the city got around to it, they would do from here, and then they would come back and do all that?
No.
No.
He's saying you would build the
Talking about
city's
building
responsibility.
This portion in here,
Yep.
and then not building this portion?
Right. In other words, you're going to eliminate the gap, right? So we always talk about sidewalks.
I'm building
to nowhere.
sidewalks on city property.
Well, we don't know what anybody's doing, right?
Right.
We're just throwing it out there, right?
But I would be building sidewalk on
Yes,
city
Mr.
property.
Campbell, that's correct.
Right.
They would be building
But
on your property.
in trade, when they do it, they will finish the other portion. We don't even know if that can happen. We just want to know if it could. Would you be open to doing that? Because then there isn't a gap, right? Then there's a complete path from the bridge to the
Consistent.
property. It's consistent
To your parking lot?
on one side.
I guess I'm okay with that. The main thing that I would say is, before I do that, I would like to see the plan so that when all the handicap stuff here, you know, I don't want to build a property, you know, I don't want to spend money building the sidewalk, and then 3 years from now, they come in and tear that out because the handicap's doing stuff. I'm just not trying to waste any money, you know? I don't,
And we don't
money's
want
a
to waste your money.
finite resource, and, you
Right.
know, that's why I don't want to put it up for 7 years or something. I'm okay with working with something that works for everybody. I really am. I just didn't feel like it was good for me to do this and still have a big old gap there, and so.
Right. I just think that there's room to, I think there's negotiating room someplace, right? I think that business owners are asked to pivot every day, right? Every day you're asked to pivot around this and pivot around that, and we need you to do this. And I think sometimes we can flip the tables. Maybe the city needs to pivot. Maybe we need to figure out a way for the city of San Angelo to pivot to accommodate this particular situation that's really different.
I'm just saying, before I spend money or before I go to the bank and burn credit on that letter, you know, let's all get together and get a plan together, and then I'll do my part, the city will do their part. I just don't want to be hanging out there spending a bunch of money, and then this never happens over here, you know. So, and I think as part of that, all of this, you know, back here needs to be looked at also. Every day, people park in my parking lot right here and come down here and do wedding pictures and baby pictures.
I did it yesterday.
It's very popular. When I came over here, the city trucks are parked right here in my parking lot, going out into the park and doing the stuff. I don't complain. I'm a good, you know, but I'm just here saying, let's get a system, let's get something that all of us agree on, and then I'm happy, you know. I just don't want to piecemeal it and me be the only one spending money, and then all of a sudden nothing else happens, and that's all. So.
I would like to ask John, I know there a lot of scenarios have been thrown out, but do you remember the last scenario that Mr. Gully gave? Have you ever heard of anything like that? And is that something that can be discussed sort of with city staff? And have you ever heard of anything like that? A citizen doing the construction on city property in trade for the city doing the construction on their property
If
down the road.
someone trips on that sidewalk in the next year and sues the city, is the city going to come back and say, well,
Yeah, that's
Mr.
what I'm-
Campbell
I think
built
there's
that
a lot-
sidewalk? He's
Yeah,
Well,
there's a
the
lot
legal,
to do.
legal obligation is a different subject that I won't get into, but I've not heard that specific scenario, but I have seen scenarios where private property owners have constructed it beyond their development to connect to an existing sidewalk farther down. I guess I would say that's within your authority to do.
It just
I
seems to
believe.
me like, and guys, I mean, if I'm way off, tell me. It just seems to me like at least connecting one of the gaps is a starting point, right? Rather than having two incomplete projects on either side of each other, you have an opportunity possibly to at least have one finished project to where you can move on down the road.
Understanding that the sidewalk is going to be built on city property, like Mr. Gully discussed, even where the decomposed granite sidewalk is right now in his landscaped area, that's on city property. It's effectively in the right-of-way of the city property. I think what we could offer would be the performance guarantee for the cost not to exceed what we would estimate the sidewalk on his property to be, this portion. And then if an agreement can get made to do this portion for that cost, that would be the way to go. And I mean,
And that could be a separate discussion, is what you're saying. Let's get the financial guarantee done for the property, and then step two might be to figure out if there's a compromise somewhere down the road to address it.
I'm fine with it. I'm
Okay,
fine with
let's
working
do
with
that.
the city. I don't mind just, because
I
I don't
agree.
want to be out there, the only one out there.
and you know,
Thank you,
that
Mr.
way-
Campbell, and thank you for your willingness to work with the city on
Yes, I
this.
mean, this is a
We really appreciate it.
interesting situation.
So are you able to put that into a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the plat with the condition that the property owner provide a financial guarantee for the sidewalks. Let's see. Yeah, we've got the parking lot issue that I guess we have to address too, right?
We can do that as part of our plan review.
Okay, so that's it. That the property owner provide a financial guarantee for the sidewalk requirement from the city.
And the city and the property owner plan this together? Is that part of your motion?
No.
Okay.
Just the guarantee.
I'll second
We have
that.
we have an understanding from the staff that they're going to work with the property owner to maybe in a second step talk about the sections or trades or something.
And we're not making him put the sidewalk across the parking lot, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
The engineering department's agreed to work with the property owner on the
The sidewalk through the.
Yes.
on the sidewalk requirement through the parking lot
Yeah, that's just
to
silly.
use existing pavement.
Right. Okay.
I'm going to second that.
One discussion before that's all done?
Sure.
A woman in the audience just asked me, why doesn't the city just fix this and then this is the trail instead of all this junk we've been talking about?
It can be discussed in the
I think
plan.
because the shortest path is through the front of your property, and I don't know that the pathway in front of your property is a result of the stairs that go down into that park. I think it's people wanting to pass through
Shortest
from
way.
bridge to bridge.
Is it an ADA requirement that it's the straightest line, or is it
No.
just?
No, but
Traffic.
I think you're still gonna have a worn pathway
Yes,
on
I
your
agree.
property
Trust me, I
after
know.
it's, yeah,
They're gonna walk right across that. Right.
right.
And the other thing that I want to just bring up is, I've got a sprinkler system right in here. So when we're doing sidewalks, that'll have to be
Adjusted.
adjusted or moved
Yes,
or
sir.
something like that, so. Okay, she just asked me and I wanted to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any further discussion? Okay, last for a vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's a 6-0.
Really?
We're going into subdivision plats. We have a preliminary plat for Holscher Farm Estates. Yeah, we're now into the regular agenda. Public hearing and consideration of request for approval of a preliminary plat for Holscher Farm Estates, generally located south of the intersection of Country Club Road and Hilton Head Boulevard in the city of San Angelo's extraterritorial jurisdiction, ETJ, on 103.288 acres.
Good morning, Commissioners. This is a preliminary plat for Holscher Farms Estates on 103.288 acres on addressed tracks south of Country Club Road and Hilton Head Boulevard. It's located within the ETJ, so no zoning applies. So we're going to break this down into two parts to show you the plat configuration. This is the north side of the plat, and by the way, it'll be for 81 lots. And then these lots here will continue down. These internal streets will be extended, and that's the south end of the property. Now, the subject plat, as I mentioned, will go along Country Club Road The applicant, they do have 60 feet of right-of-way as required. They'll have to show that on the revised plat. There is a piece here, as we'll get into our analysis in a minute, a 3.41 acre tract. It's about 273 feet long that has not been included in the preliminary plat, and that leaves some discontinuity. As it stands, they would not have to pave that portion of Country Club if this got approved, so there could be a gap in the street. So we just wanted to note that. As I mentioned, Country Club Road is 60 feet wide as required, but it is only 20 feet of paving width right now. There's also a future collector street, minor collector road going through the property here, and we'll continue down to another future collector street. This was not shown on the plat, and so the applicant would either have to show that in the future or get an amendment to the master thoroughfare plan. Staff recommendation is to deny the preliminary plat as submitted for Holscher Farms Estates for not being consistent with the city's comprehensive plan and the intent of purpose statements in Chapter 2 of the subdivision ordinance. I'll go through this quickly. The rationale for denial, we first looked at subdivision ordinance Chapter 5 has to be consistent with the comp plan. The transportation policies in the 2003 plan, goal number 2, talks about continuity of traffic within and between neighborhoods and throughout the community. By leaving that 3.41 acre tract, this is almost 273 feet, and so there would be a deficient road width. You'd have that piece would only be 20 feet, and then the rest would be paved to 30 feet, so there'd be a gap in the middle. We believe that would hinder continuity and safe connection to neighborhoods in contravention of that policy. We also looked at the rural land use policies in the plan. That's the designation, is rural. The exclusion of the large expanse on Country Club Road, we believe, is in contravention to the policy of quality development, which is not demonstrated based on an inconsistent road width. And third, believe it's not consistent with the intent of purpose statements. We've honed in on the 4 major ones. B, which is to protect and provide for the public health, safety, and general welfare of the city of San Angelo. You've got a discontinuous paving width would create a traffic hazard due to rapid lane shifting. You may be familiar with the Twin Mountain Drive example as you go west on Southland. The preliminary plat was approved there, and the final plats were done in different phases, leaving a gap in the middle of an irregular paving width. It's quite unsafe as you go down there. You'll see dirt and grass on half of the street, and then the other side wasn't. Luckily, that plat had come through where the storage facility was going to go, and they finally paved it, but it's been like that for several years. Our engineering services department had done some research on the Twin Mountain area. They mentioned it cost taxpayers approximately $75,000 for those street improvements, plus the signage and barricades that had to be installed. So this is our concern with Holscher as well. D is to provide streets that ensure safe, convenient, and functional systems for vehicular and pedestrian circulation. You have an intermittent roadway in the middle would not provide for safe or functional circulation, and also the irregular street pattern could create potential traffic hazards. And that's planning and engineering's position on that. You've also got 2 neighborhoods, one to the southeast, one to the northwest, and then these have 81 new homes in this area. So ideally, it would be good to have a smooth transition over and not that missing piece. J is to provide low city maintenance costs and a quality of development that will retain stable tax values. If you exclude this piece of property and you have the 273-foot gap on the road, that wouldn't provide any guarantee that Country Club would be widened, and that may lead to extra costs for city residents. Development costs would be borne by the public. Finally, P, to provide the extension of streets and highways when necessary to ensure the orderly growth of the city. You exclude that piece of property, you've got, like I say, about a 10-foot deficient width required, and that is a large expanse. You have inconsistent road width, so that's not orderly growth. And also, if the plat is approved, and I guess this is the big one, there's no requirement for the developer to ever have to pay for that gap. They only have to, under the subdivision ordinance, they're only responsible for the land for the streets in front of the properties, not the properties that are excluded. Staff recommendation is to deny the preliminary plat for Holscher Farms Estates for not being consistent with the city's comprehensive plan nor the intent of purpose statements in Chapter 2 of the subdivision ordinance. Any questions or comments?
Can you go back to the map that shows where that 3.41 acre gap is?
Sure.
Please? So it's the pink area that you're,
Right in the middle.
okay,
Looks like.
just right there. Okay. Okay, thank you. Any questions of Jeff?
And the roadway there wouldn't be required to be widened, therefore it's going to cause a hazard.
That's correct. So you'd have this area here would be essentially 30
Eastbound
feet.
traffic.
And then it would taper down to only 20 there and then come back out again to 30. Understand,
You may want
correct?
to speak. They're here in the audience. Okay. All right, any other questions for Jeff?
That was going to be my question.
All right, we'll open it for public comment, please.
Good morning, Russell Gully with SKG. I want to start off by kind of making the comment, this is a preliminary plat. A preliminary plat is not intended to create platted lots. You know, the city's approval of preliminary plat does not constitute acceptance of the subdivision or land development, but is merely an authorization to proceed with the preparation of one or more corresponding final plats for city approval. So a preliminary plat at this juncture is not putting lots on the ground. It's really a guidance document that we start with because the developer's not going to go and put all of this on the ground at one time. And so, yes, we're aware of the city's, we met with city, they presented it to us. And at that meeting, it was kind of brought across to us that we needed to bring this into the preliminary plat or have some sort of an agreement in place to make sure we dedicate or improve the land in front of that tract. And then we were kind of given, or your other option is to sign the 30-day waiver and we'll talk about it later on. And so we wanted to proceed with this to move forward with this. And we've had numerous meetings with the city about this. We met with them early on, presented a preliminary plan. They had some comments. We adjusted based on those comments, and then we presented this one. And then through those previous meetings, that this was never really brought up specific about leaving this piece out. There's three brothers that own 3 tracts in here, and they're doing this together to create a good cohesive development out there. And so this piece of property they don't own, they don't control, and so we're left with it. I guess the Twin Mountain issue really came and was on the city's hearts because it's just been a very recent issue, and I don't want to, I don't know that it was necessarily fair to kind of tie those together, because we were talking about, we had out on Twin Mountain Drive, you had a 64-foot street going down to a 32-foot street. So you had something that looked really like this. So, we understand the need to fix and fill that gap. In this case, we're really talking about it's currently a 20-foot street that the city built not very long ago, and the city made a decision to build it only at 20 feet. And so we would have to improve our incremental half, which would take it from 20 to 25 feet, not necessarily the 10 feet for the full width. So if we would have a much smaller gap. And so we're talking about 5 feet, and 5 feet, you're not going to have 2 lanes of traffic maneuvering and trying to move over like the Twin Mountain Drive. So we understand the correlation. They correlate very minutely, as I demonstrated there. So really, we don't believe that that's a fair correlation to that. So ultimately, we're going to ask for your approval of this preliminary plat as it's presented. There was also talk about the master thoroughfare plan and what it showed graphically. We met with city staff, and we talked about, well, this goes through a piece of property we don't control, and so we could leave it like this, and then we go tie in a road that would go to the back part of this pink property, and that's not going to do any good. So we talked about making the connection to Hilton Head be that line. And so, you know, when they do the master thoroughfare plan, it's kind of like taking crayon at 1,000 feet and drawing lines. So we didn't, the city at the time never said anything about needing to do an amendment to the master thoroughfare plan. I don't know if this isn't just another issue trying to make a reason to deny the plat, but until we got the report, it really wasn't brought up to that. So we believe this is in close enough general conformance with the master thoroughfare plan. We are showing, we have this bottom part here, which would be an extension of Ratliff Road that we did add after we had the meeting with the city and talked about how the implications of the master thoroughfare plan would impact this property. You know, the city talked about a whole lot of subjectivity kind of to deny. Ultimately, this isn't going to be an asset to the city. The developer is not wanting to be annexed. The intent of this subdivision is to be a rural and not in the city limits, you know, and they understand that. And you know, the big draw for developers to bring something into the city is the city services, and water being that main service. The developers are aware of that, and they opted and are aware that they're not going to get city services out there. And so we did not request annexation for this. I can kind of go on, but I'd really like to just kind of see what your thoughts are, specific questions, specific concerns for this preliminary plat.
So you're saying that you would just move that main road to Hilton Head, it would be continuous with their road, and use that as the main thoroughfare?
I'm not sure how to clear the screen.
The bottom left.
Okay, awesome.
Magic.
So that would be, this line would move over, and that would be the collector street, and it would line up with Hilton Head.
And let me clarify, that was not a recommendation, part of our recommendation for denial. It was simply a condition that they show the collector on either the street that he's shown or the one to the left. One of those two streets needs to be designated as a collector, but that would have just been a condition, not a reason for denial.
Okay.
So do we need to have it spoke about amending the master thoroughfare plan? Would that be a
That's
condition?
only if you were asking to not have one of those streets as a collector.
My misunderstanding on that. So we're good with this one then. We'll show that one as the collector street on the master thoroughfare plan. So really it sounds like we just come down to this little piece of
170
property, 273 feet. Country Club Road that's in the city limits is about 10,000 feet long, so that little 273 foot represents 2.7% of that segment, you know, that the city purposefully built at 20 feet. I'm guessing whenever they did that, they had reasoning for doing it at that width. So,
explain to me why, what happens when the city chooses to build a road short of their own requirements, and a situation like this occurs when a developer doesn't have access to a piece of the property. I mean, are we stifling development because of the city's lack of desire to do things properly?
Well, I wouldn't categorize it as the city not wanting to do things properly. In a rural area like this, it's not uncommon for a city to build a street at a minimum width. That's the minimum required for safety, knowing that as the property develops, the completion of the street will be done by the developers adjacent, which is the typical way streets are built. So that's not an unusual way to do that.
It doesn't make sense to me that they do that knowing the future development's going to occur and things like this are going to happen, and then turn around and tie the hands of the developer or put public safety at risk.
Well, and I think the idea is that development should happen in a logical and consistent way. So yes, if you're jumping past where there is a completed standard road.
I've never had an engineer tell me to do anything in a logical and consistent way.
and maybe ultimately we're getting the cart before the horse here, because this is just a preliminary plat. We're not talking about building a street. We'll be back before you guys with a final plat. And that may be the appropriate time to kind of beat this one like we beat the path, if you will, earlier. You know, so really we want just an approval of this preliminary plat. You know, maybe the developer can go to the owner of the pink property and strike up a deal, or maybe they're willing to add that extra 5 feet then, but we don't feel that it's a reason to deny a preliminary plat at this point in time. So really, I'm trying to cut it short. We all have stuff to do, and just approve our preliminary plat, and we can have this discussion next time we're up here with a final plat.
Thank you, Russell.
Let me address that point as well. A preliminary plat basically locks in that development. If you approve a preliminary plat today, if they bring in a final plat that's consistent with that preliminary plat, you're obligated to approve it. You've vested them in that approval. And so that's our concern with the preliminary plat being approved. This is your opportunity. If you think this is a problem, you may not. If you do, I think we would urge you to deny the preliminary plat. I think you would not have the ability to deny future plats that they bring in that are, as long as they're consistent with this preliminary plat if it's approved.
What if they submitted 2 plats and divided the land where west of the land that they don't own and east of the land that they don't own? What's the city's position on approving 2 plats that are basically the same as what's here? I mean, do you see what I'm saying? If we had 3 owners instead of 2 in this stretch, are we not going to approve a plat on either side of that lot because they don't control it?
I think that's a good question. I think part of the issue here is they have submitted as a preliminary plat that's intended to be a grander plan for the entire area, which is raising the concern. Could there be situations similar to this where multiple owners come in separately and we get the same problem? Yes. But when it is all under one ownership, we have an opportunity to prevent the problem.
Who owns the 3 acres?
Right, so that's my question, is Mr. Holscher, who is the owner of that property? Who is not a member of the group that's subdividing? Right, so back a few months ago when we met with the applicants on this, engineering staff and planning staff, you know, it was discussed at that meeting that this would present an issue from the city's perspective. And I believe that it was discussed at that meeting that the applicant would pursue the improvements of the street through that section. You know, I recall that discussion there, and it seemed not be an issue at that meeting that the applicant would widen that portion, as the city expressed that it was a concern that it wouldn't be improved when both sides were. Possibly I'm misremembering that, but. And also, I want to, for the record, you know, this north side of Country Club Road is developed. There's a 10-foot deficient width on the street, so my understanding also is that the applicant is required for a 10-foot addition to Country Club Road to bring it up to the minimum standard, not the 5 incremental half, because the other side is already developed.
Never read in the subdivision ordinance that if another side's already developed, you have to go and pull in their side. We bring stuff before this commission all the time that has platted property on the opposite side of the road, and we're only, the developer of that side is only obligated to improve his incremental half. There's never been, it doesn't say anything in there about if the property on the opposite side's developed or not. You know, and certainly we may have had a discussion, and we were all talking about ways, you know, that the city did express concerns, and that's what we're saying. Maybe we can go to this property owner and bring it in. You know, we've talked about it. You know, is there a way to solve this? But that's a discussion that we ask you to allow us to have once you approve this preliminary plat. And I appreciate the concern of Mr. James. The approval of the preliminary plat, I believe, kind of approves and locks us in, really locks the developer in to this configuration. You know, certainly there's always, when we have a final plat before you, there always can be that discussion about that. And really you have 3 brothers. One owns this part here, another one owns kind of this part here, and then you have the other one owning this part. And so really, they could have come in at 3 separate times, Mr. Stribling, and we would have just looked at them on a case-by-case basis. Maybe that's my fault in advising them, hey, let's do this all together and address it at one time, but we just felt it would be in everybody's best interest to see the big picture.
Thank you. Is there any further public comment?
Well, personally, I think looking at this 3.4 acres, comparing it to that problem over on Twin Mountain is just absolutely not fair. We're talking about grapefruits and lemons here. I just don't see where this is near the issue as what we had over there. Personally, I'm in favor of this.
I'm just going to say something real quick about those 3 acres.
State your name, please.
My name's Steve Holscher. San Angelo, I live right on Country Club Road. Been there all my life. Morning, Terry. Morning. Commission. That 3 acres, there's 400 or 500 acres over there that's still being actively farmed. And that barn is probably going to stay there for a long time because it's a maintenance and repair facility. And so there's nothing much we can do with it. My brother's getting very old, and he's can't walk, and he is just not going to change. So that will have to be addressed at a separate issue. The other thing about staff recommending that this road be widened in that particular area, a 2-point-something% stretch, I will tell you, I lived on that road all my life. I watched the traffic increase. You increase that width of that road in that small of a section, and I guarantee there's going to be some crazy drivers. People are going to go left, right when they're not supposed to, right around Hilton Head. And we're going to have some major wrecks there because if there's people coming from the very west end through off of Knickerbocker and off of South Concho, and that is a very high-speed area of the road. There's motorcycle cops there all the time. So I don't see where it's in the best interest right now at this particular point in time to widen that road and give those people a chance to pass their neighbors when the other neighbors are slowing down, or somebody's going to be pulling out off Hilton Head to try to merge in traffic. We're going to create a traffic problem there like nobody's ever seen. The other thing is, I don't see how the city can recommend a denial just because of one particular tract of land that we don't own, we have no control over. And if they're recommending a denial on that, they're depriving us of our right and our constitutionally protected rights to develop this land. So I don't see where they can actually deny us. That makes a draw a line in the sand. The other thing, if you look at all the roads in the subdivision, they're recommended to be 60 foot in width. I've talked to multiple county commissioners in this county, and they say no. They will not accept a 60-foot wide county road. It is beyond their ability to maintain that road of cost effectiveness. Plus a concrete shoulder, absolutely not. They told me that personally to my face. They'll take two-shot gravel, but they do not want a concrete edge because of their equipment will not maintain that road. So we have a conflict there. The other thing is, it really looks anti-development and anti-commercial by the city. You have a development out in the country at Wall School District in Tom Green County. They're relying on some form of tax revenue. Wall School just put up a new school and have a bond to pay for. Our Tom Green County Commissioners, we got a new jail we want to build. So we're going to deny a development that has $25 to $30 million worth of tax revenue. Man, these county guys, our people in the rural area, rural San Angelo and Tom Green County, we're drawing a line in the sand if we go ahead and deny this. Any questions?
I personally don't think you should have to be dealing with this, but I know technically it's in the ETJ, but you're out of the city limits.
I know we are.
You shouldn't have to be dealing with all this stuff, but because of the ETJ, you are. So, anyway.
The county, it's boiled up to their attention. I think city staff and county commissioners probably do need to get together, get on the same page, because if the city ETJ is going to go out into the county and stifle county development and county taxes and our ability to tax and keep this county running as a whole, I think it's going to one day we're gonna have everybody's gotta come to the table and start talking, because we're there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Is there any further public comment? Okay. We call for the vote or call
Move
for
to
a?
approve.
Okay.
If I could, we'll accept that motion. If we could put up the conditions, we have some conditions. If you choose to approve, there are some of our standard conditions that would need to be added to the motion. I think, based on the comment, this is our recommended condition to ensure that it be phased in order for the road to be developed properly. So if I'm hearing the discussion that you do not want that condition to be in place, so we can strike that one. I think this one can be stricken as well because or it should be reworded to say that one of the north-south, I think that's north-south streets, would be the designated collector street.
Right.
The 60-foot right-of-way dedication, I think we've already addressed that. A drainage study, that's a normal. And let me clarify, he mentioned a 60-foot wide street. That's not the pavement width, that's the actual right-of-way for the street. The pavement width is narrower than 60 feet. And that is something that we have met with the county commissioners on, and they're okay with this. Again, it wouldn't be a 60-foot pavement. That's just the street right-of-way. Then the standard condition for a drainage study, and that the developer be aware that there are airport zoning restrictions that may apply to the area.
And I will keep my same motion by striking those first, 2, 3?
Striking the first one and rewording the second one to say
Right.
that they will show the collector street on one of
Exactly.
those streets.
Yes.
I'll second.
Have a first and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed with no? It's a 6-0. Next, we have Vision Plan Amendment. It's VP 16-03, Halvik. Public hearing and consideration of a request for approval of an amendment to the City of San Angelo Comprehensive Plan, AKA Vision Plan, changing certain lands from the neighborhood future land use category to the neighborhood center future land use category, generally located along the north side of Loop 306 frontage road between Brook Hollow Lane and Southwest Boulevard on 0.5510 acres.
Madam Chair, I'd like to also request that the plan development be heard in conjunction with this since they're both associated.
Do you want me to read that, or do you want to?
Yes, if you would, please. Item
Okay.
3B.
And that one is PD 16-08, Halvik. Public hearing and consideration of a request for approval of a rezoning from the Office Commercial, CO, zoning district to the Plan Development, PD, zoning district for uses permitted to the Office Commercial, CO, zoning district, a contractor's office with indoor storage, and the provision of a master sign plan to include a billboard generally located along the north side of West Loop 306 frontage road between Brook Hollow Lane and Southwest Boulevard on 0.5510 acres.
Permission to proceed?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. And once again, for the record, David Stallworth, Principal Planner. I'd like to call your attention to cases number VP 16-03 and PD 16-08, Holvik, as read into the record by the Commission Chair. The .551 acre site is located at 3782 West Loop 306 and is located in single-member District 3, Counselor Farmers District, and is also located within the Sunset neighborhood. The second slide it shows you a perspective of area future land use conditions as called for by the comprehensive plan. It's currently called neighborhood, and it's requesting a change to facilitate this zone change to plan development from neighborhood to neighborhood center. Moving to slide number 3, gives you a perspective of surrounding zoning and site zoning. It's currently office commercial and is also requesting a change to plan development as written to the record earlier. This is a initial concept plan which is going to be filed in conjunction with the plan development. They had submitted revision to show some changes to the proposed billboard sign. Hadn't had that available due to some technical difficulties with our email server earlier this morning, but that will be, they did meet in compliance with one of the conditions of approval as suggested in, later on. It'll indicate that they do propose 2 buildings along with corresponding parking within the site, and also the billboard, which will be located at the southwest corner of the building, or of the lot. Stand corrected there. This gives you a perspective of billboard coverage along that strip or that segment of Loop 306 between Southwest and College Hills. As indicated, it's going to be, if erected, it's going to be the the westernmost billboard along that stretch. There's already 4 billboards, 2 on either side of each frontage road, and this would probably be the last one that you would see from Southwest onward to Houston Hart going towards Abilene. That's pretty much a pristine corridor from that point forward. The next slide gives you some perspectives of the subject property along the 306 frontage. There's some substantial grade differential there. And if you notice, there's a guardrail which encumbers a good portion of the property frontage. And that's as required by TxDOT. There's another perspective of the property looking southward. And if you notice the street that's on the right-hand side in the second slide, that's not a public street, that's a private street easement. For the benefit of the Wells Fargo to the immediate west of it. The next slide gives you some perspectives of surrounding properties, as does this slide as well. Now, with respect to the future land use designation amendment, our rationale for approval is as follows. With respect to vision plan goals, the proposed reclassification does meet at least neighborhood center goals and policies. With respect to land use, it's been historically vacant, and it's believed that any alternative development proposal could actually provide a necessary catalyst for this property. It should be noted that this property was zoned approximately 30 years ago from multifamily residential to office commercial. Of course, there may be some other peculiar nuances to the property which are specific, which include the development. Again, they're hoping that maybe this will probably go and stimulate that. With respect to tax base, there's no reduction in taxable revenue or employment and opportunities which are anticipated if the future land use designation were changed. With respect to housing, both neighborhood and neighborhood center do support multifamily residential, but that's predicated on a zoning that's in place. If it's felt that something along residential would be more suited, then they'd have to go and retailer the planned development or just do a different outright zoning, or conventional zone, I should say. With respect to infrastructure, street frontage is already in place. Replatting will address any additional improvements, provided that they need to draw a building permit on it, and that's when replatting will be triggered. And there aren't any adverse impact on schools, parks, and there's no reductions in the level of service which are going to be anticipated in lieu of in light of the redesignation. Now, our rationale for approval of the zone change, it is compatible with plans or policies of the comprehensive plan. Corresponding future land use amendment is required, and it does promote at least 3 neighborhood center goals and policies. It is consistent with the zoning ordinance because the existing CO zoning predates this request. However, the PD to allow the alternative development in conjunction with the placement of a billboard, it does meet the spirit of the zoning and sign ordinance, particularly with respect to the current zoning patterns which are required under the sign ordinance, which this particular site is in a corridor which allows for billboards, but because the zoning is not in place, this will help allow for some flexibility. It is compatible with the surrounding area because there are existing offices and billboards within proximity to subject property, which was demonstrated in an earlier slide. With respect to changes in conditions, the site has been vacant for over 30 years, and that's in spite of a zone change from residential to non-residential. It is believed that an alternative development proposal could provide a necessary catalyst to redevelop the property. With respect to environmental effects, planned developments are tailored to go and take into account certain aspects of the property as well as surrounding conditions, so we will provide mitigation as necessary to go and to respond to area conditions and site conditions. With respect to community need, the planned development will hopefully address a potentially underserved market. Plan development is consistent with zoning patterns that are already in place with respect to non-residential and billboard development. So that is why we're recommending approval of that. 5 notices were mailed out on November 30th. And after discussions with the applicant, 5 revised notices were mailed out on December 7th. In either case, staff has received no letters of opposition or support for the project. It also should be noted that we produced additional notifications for the benefit. Wait, did I say something weird?
No,
Go ahead.
Just the background noise.
Jackhammer.
Don't have me worried here. Anyway. We provided additional notification for the tenants, the adjacent multifamily, I get what you're saying now. Additional multifamily development is shown right here on lot number 4. There are approximately about 18 or 20 tenants, so they were notified as well. Again, we haven't received anything from them. With this in mind, staff is recommending approval of VP 1603, a request to change certain lands from neighborhood to neighborhood center future land use designation. And also in light of the previous analysis, we are also recommending approval of the plan development, a request for rezoning from the office commercial zoning district to the plan development zoning district for uses permitted in office commercial, a contractor's office with indoor storage, and a provision of a master sign plan to include a billboard, subject to 10 conditions of approval, which I may read into the record because they're rather lengthy.
Okay,
And
we've read them. Thank you.
So with that in mind, this concludes my presentation. Are there any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any public comment?
Good morning, Russell with SKG. We concur with staff's report. We appreciate the opportunity that they worked with us through some of these questions and nuances, so be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Just make sure you speak to the microphone. We've got some contractors doing some work.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Any discussion on this? Commissioners?
No.
Have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve both motions, or both requests, I should say.
We just need you to do that in 2 separate votes.
Separate.
So
Okay.
Is the comprehensive plan?
The first
Yeah, I'll
one,
make a
yes.
motion to approve the comprehensive plan. Amendment.
Second. Okay. And all in favor, will, yes, Mr. Crisp. All in favor of that, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? It's a 6-0. And then we also have the PD.
I will make a motion to approve the PD as written.
Okay. Do we have a second on
Second as
plan
well.
development? That's also Mr. Crisp. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, passes with a 6-0. Next rezoning, we have Z 16-09, 1225 Knickerbocker LLC. Public hearing and consideration of a request for approval of a rezoning from the light manufacturing ML zoning district to the general commercial CG zoning district, generally located approximately 550 feet northeast of the intersection of Knickerbocker Road and University Avenue on 1.232 acres.
Before I,
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, okay, didn't see my arrow, so let me go down to the end of the page. We also have conditional use on that property. The case is CU 16-09, 1225 Knickerbocker LLC. Public hearing and consideration of a request for approval of a conditional use to allow retail sales and service on property located within the light manufacturing ML zoning district, generally located approximately 550 feet northeast of the intersection of Knickerbocker Road and University Avenue on 1.232 acres. Jeff?
because these items are related to the same property, I'm going to focus on the zone change primarily for the analysis. And when I get to the conditional use, because the analysis is similar, I'll skip through that, just so that's clear.
Thank you.
Louder, okay, here we go. Okay, so for the zone change, this is for Bush's Chicken. They have a proposed location on Knickerbocker between Jackson and Austin Street on 1.232 acres of land. they have already platted this. There will be a vacant piece over here for future development. And so the plan is to build on Lot 3 and then have Lot 2 available for future. They've submitted a zone change request and the following conditional use. The purpose of the conditional use was to allow them to expedite their development process, to allow a new restaurant to go in. But the zone change, which will then require the 2 council readings after today, will also allow the use in the future. Future land use on the property is commercial. The zoning map identifies the property as light manufacturing ML. These are some photos currently. Over the last 10 years, there's been this area, basically between Jackson all the way to Bryant, on the south end was zoned light manufacturing, but it has been trending commercial more and more over the years. So a lot of restaurants and hotels in that area have already gone through zone changes or previous conditional uses. There was actually 3 conditional uses on this property, but because at that time the development hadn't proceeded, those permits had expired within 12 months. So now Bush's Chicken plans to locate here. This is looking west at Cheddar's, immediately adjacent. This is north at Angelo State University. This is east at Angelo Place Apartments. And this is looking at the property. So Lot 2, which will be the site of Bush's Chicken, slightly to the west of that, between Bush's and Cheddar's, is vacant Lot 3 for future retail development. That could be retail, commercial, it could be a restaurant, anything permitted in the CG district. So our rationale for approval of the zone change and of the conditional use, the commercial land use designation supports CG zoning. It also supports a conditional use for a restaurant or retail. The proposed site plan, which I'll jump to in a minute, shows that the proposal will be consistent with the zoning ordinance and all of the parking standards. They've got 29 parking spaces on the site plan, which will allow them up to 114 seats for a restaurant, so that's substantial. The south side of Knickerbocker, as mentioned, already has commercial uses over a series of time. The change conditions, the ML zoning is no longer appropriate for this commercial corridor. No anticipated environmental effects. Any grading and drainage could be dealt with at the site plan stage. There is a community need. You've got various restaurants along the area already. You've also got a local high school and an elementary school nearby, as well as Angelo State. So there and other businesses that could use the location at lunch or at dinner. Development patterns. The existing site is already platted, as mentioned. And Knickerbocker, although it's owned by TxDOT, is an arterial road, so it can accommodate traffic volume. 6 notices were mailed out. We have received 2 in favor for the zone change and 2 in opposition none in opposition and 2 in favor of both projects. Staff recommendation is to approve a rezoning from the light manufacturing ML zoning district to the general CG zoning district. Let me just go ahead now to the conditional use. Just quickly, this is the site plan provided. So there's Bush's Chicken, Lot 2. There's Lot 3 for future development. I did do a site analysis. All of the parking and maneuvering area and setbacks would comply with the CG zoning once the zone change goes in. Like I say, we're doing both items at the same time. I'm happy to read the conditions for the conditional use into record. If not, we can move forward. The staff recommendation for the conditional use is to allow retail sales and service on a property within the light manufacturing district as well, subject to the 7 conditions of approval.
Thank you. Have any questions of Jeff?
Just for being the sheep capital, we sure have a lot of new chicken restaurants
I know,
coming.
that's what I was just thinking, yeah. So do we have any public comment?
Russell with SKG, just happy to answer any questions.
None? Thank you.
This one will also need 2 separate motions.
So we're looking at first the rezoning.
Move that we
Motion to
approve the
approve.
rezone.
Take one of those as a move and one as a second. Yes.
I'm the second, I guess.
those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. 6-0 on that. Then we have the conditional use.
I move that we approve the conditional use.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? No. That's also 6-0. And then we have, next we have rezonings. We have PD 16-09 Rancho Sunset Plaza LP. It's a public hearing in consideration of a request for approval of a rezoning from the Planned Development PD 97-03 zoning district to a new Planned Development PD zoning district to allow for all of the permitted uses in the general commercial CG zoning district, generally located approximately 700 feet southwest of the intersection of Sunset Drive and West Loop 306 on 8.4207 acres.
Okay, Plan Commission. So this is the existing site with Bed Bath & Beyond and Petco. It's immediately adjacent to the Office Max, which is up here, and Target. Originally, this was all one lot and has been platted over phases. The original plan development in 1997 included the Office Max portion as well as the subject site. The Office Max developer has chosen not to be included in this. So when we do our analysis in a minute, we've looked at parking and zoning for each separate lot to make sure that that lot wouldn't be deficient either, and we'll be able to verify that all of the lots will comply. So the new planned development is not going to include Office Max. It's just going to be for the two retail buildings here and two new buildings, which will be a total of 9,000 square feet of retail area in the bottom southeast corner here, which I'll show you in a minute. The future land use on the property is commercial, and the zoning as right now is planned development 9703. These are some photos looking at the site. They all share, through the previous agreement in 1997, common access and parking. So the parking and access is shared. And so we've calculated the parking over the aggregate total of area. This is west at Loop 306. This is south at the apartment complex. This is looking east at the Hastings Plaza, and that's Sunset right there. And this is north at the Target Plaza. So we have two existing retail buildings on the property. This is the Bed Bath & Beyond site, 4157 to 4175 Sunset. And this is immediately north of that, the existing Ross Dress Building, 4205 Sunset. So the proposed retail basically would be a 9,000 square foot retail and or office location at the southwest corner of the property. And then immediately south will be a smaller 3,000 square foot pod. And so the existing PD did not cover the new retail space, and so hence the new plan development application. This is a good picture of it here, the concept plan provided. So there's the two new retail buildings in red, the two existing buildings in blue, and the green is part of the old PD, which is not included. So they'll still be subject to the 97 plan development for Office Max. So our rationale is to recommend approval based on the following. We believe the proposed new plan development is compatible with the commercial land use policies, which support additional retail development. We believe it's consistent with the zoning ordinance. Based on our parking calculations, there will still be 149 surplus parking spaces. We did 2 site visits, one on the weekend and one during lunchtime during the weekdays, and we found the busiest area really is the Target side, and there's still about half of the parking spaces were empty. As you get further south, where the proposed retail would be close to Petco, it's empty a lot of the time, and I'd say over 2/3 of that parking was empty from my calculations. So we believe that's a need for more retail development here. It's compatible with the surrounding area. You've got existing retail shopping all along Sunset Drive. Change conditions based on the parking analysis. The site's being underutilized, as I mentioned, so you have 149 surplus parking spaces. No anticipated environmental effects. The site's already been paved. We believe there is a community need just given the underutilization of the buildings. And finally, the development patterns would not be affected. The lots were already platted. and with direct and abutting access to West Loop 306, as well as through Sunset through the common access drive. 7 notices were mailed out. We did not receive any responses in favor or in opposition. So staff recommendation is to approve the rezoning from the Plan Development 9703 zoning district to a Plan Development PD 1609 zoning district for all of the permitted uses in the general commercial CG zoning district, subject to the 5 conditions of approval. I can read those out if you'd like. Wanted to clarify the 5th one was not in your staff report, and we've added that. There is a utility easement along the south end of the property. I believe that future building that they're showing is 20 feet back, but we just want to clarify that no buildings within 20 feet of the south lot line, given that there's a utility easement
Okay,
there.
so that's being added into, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Any questions of Jeff? We have a public commenter.
Good morning, Russell with SKG. We would like you to, we appreciate staff, their report, we concur with it, except for condition number 4 of approval. There's already standards and criteria in place that mandate when an urban design review is required. And so we'd just like you to strike that, just additional governmental burden that is unnecessary. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. Any other public comment?
Make a motion to approve striking condition 4.
Okay. We have a motion to approve with striking number 4.
Second.
And a second for Mr. Crisp. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed with no? It says 6-0 vote. Okay, and we are into expansion of non-conforming uses. We have NCU 16-05 Baptist Memorial Ministries. Public hearing and consideration of a request for approval of an expansion of a non-conforming use for group living as defined in section 609 of the zoning ordinance in the low-rise multifamily residence RM1 and office commercial CO zoning districts to allow for the following new construction. New Greenhouse West, an 8,297 square foot building, and New Greenhouse East, a 9,498 square foot building, generally located on a block south of East 10th Street, east of Aiken Street, west of Holcomb Street, and north of the East Houston Hart Expressway on 4.108 acres.
Morning, Rebecca Guerra, Planning Manager. So this is an expansion of a non-conforming use, and the reason it's a non-conforming use is, as you can see, by the zoning of this, the zoning of this site, you can see is RM1. And so this site would technically not be allowed today within that zoning designation. So we've heard you in the past that the real fix for these situations is rezoning. I'm going to stand on my tippy toes. And we've heard that, but in this case, the applicant would like to move forward with the development of just 2 of these buildings, that 8,000 plus and the 9,000 plus building. In our meetings with them, they've agreed that since this is a campus, and you can see that with this larger area that has multiple zoning, they've agreed that for future expansions, they will be doing something like a plan development to fix the zoning situation and to bring that into conformance. But because they're ready to move now on 2 buildings, it was sort of a meeting in the middle between staff and the applicant. Let's go ahead and move these 2 projects forward and then have further discussions for how the plan development will take place to fix the entire site. So we wanted to let you know that we did listen to your direction. We will be moving forward with any future expansion on this site by fixing the zoning, but for right now, we think it's appropriate for them to move forward with an expansion of a non-conforming use. So here's some photos of the site. And this is actually looking here at the proposed site. And here's where the new 2 buildings will take place. Again, this approval is only going to be for these 2 buildings. In the future, we will be fixing the site. 25 notices were sent out within 200 feet, 2 written responses in favor, none in opposition, and there was a general inquiry about the development. Here's our rationale for approval. Again, we don't believe that there will be huge impacts on the site. It's already a campus. It's already developed. It's compatible with the surrounding areas. They're just expanding upon their existing uses. The effects on the natural environment will be minimal. There's clearly a community need. There's actually a study that was part of a study that was presented in your staff report, which shows how dire the situation is in San Angelo. We think it's consistent with development patterns in the immediate area. And the PD right here, as you can see, will resolve any future nonconforming uses. Again, staff's recommendation is approval of the nonconforming use expansion, subject to 3 conditions of approval. I can read them in. They're also in your staff report. This concludes my presentation. Do you have any questions?
No. Thank you. Public comment?
Good morning, Russell with SKG. I appreciate staff working with us on this. Baptist Memorials has a lot going on, a lot of moving targets trying to figure out. They're kind of rescoping, taking down some, adding new. They have a big campus going on there. So they are a continual work in progress. So we just wanted to make sure under the proposed conditions 2 and 3, prior to any further expansion, that's beyond what we're talking about for the east and west greenhouses?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay. And that kind of ties into 3, because they have a lot of property. Some of it's been platted into big tracts, some of it's not. So, you know, it will be a pretty good undertaking when we get there at that time. So long as that covers what they want to do with the 2 greenhouses, we're good with that. Be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Yes, ma'am. Okay. If you'll state your name, please.
My name is Rebecca Gray, and I live on East 10th Street.
Okay.
And the map that they sent us shows our property is part of this circle of development. So we need to know, are they going to expand out in the future and take our properties? They built a new facility on 8th Street. We never got any notice about it. They just built it.
Okay.
So
Hi,
the
ma'am.
staff can address that
I'm
for you.
Rebecca Guerra. We've had several staff members try to call you. We understand
Yes,
that you were
yes, yes.
having, we've
My
tried
hours I
several
work.
times. That circle that you see on that map, actually, I'm going to, if you let me for a second.
Sure.
So I can show you. This is a great tutorial for anybody who may be watching. So this is the circle that you're talking about?
Yes.
That's actually the 200-foot radius where we're required by our code to notify folks. That's all that means.
Okay.
Is that if you are within 200 feet of where they want to develop it, you are by law required to know what's happening within your area.
yes, I understand
And
that.
that doesn't mean that your property's affected. That just means that we have to let you know what's happening. So that means there's no development happening on your site. It just means that you have to have that letter sent to you.
All right, what does this mean by low-rise multifamily residence? Or is it
So
going to
all
be
that mean-
apartments or what?
Well, what it means is that that's just the zoning that's in place on the property. And so right now, since they want to do what's called group living or the assisted living, that's not allowed in that zoning, in the zoning that they have, that RM1. So they could do it today, but that's not what they're asking for today. Today, all they're asking for is to have an assisted living facility on that site.
Okay, they already have the Sagecrest Alzheimer's clinic there. Is that the same thing as a multi-people living there?
In this case, it's not, because it's called the group living, it's just a different use. But all they want to do is to continue the uses of an assisted living facility for the elderly.
Okay.
But do you understand how this circle?
That's
would
what
work?
threw us all off,
Okay.
because, you know, you've got all our properties.
And all that means is that by law, by our statute, or by our codes, we have to let you know what's happening in the area.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that
So
your property's
where
being
are these
affected.
2 buildings going to be? Because this whole lot is already full.
Okay, so it's actually gonna be on this one little lot is where they're going to go ahead and build it. And so what we did was, if I'm not mistaken, there's the site plan. And so on these 2 empty spots is where they're gonna put those 2 buildings.
Okay. So they're not moving into our
No, ma'am.
neighborhood? Oh, good
No,
deal.
ma'am.
That's what we were worried about.
Okay, do you have
All
any
right.
other questions?
No, that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Any further public comment? Okay. Looking for a motion. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm Patrick Temez. I'm a resident over on Aiken Street. I really have no objections over to this whole thing for Sagecrest. They have been really, they've been actually kind of like good neighbors, to be honest. One of them actually returned one of my dogs after they ran away, and apparently he wanted to be a senior helper. No, but I was also about to ask her the same thing, the concern, but I'm glad that was also the thing. So I thank you for you guys that. You guys are also, you guys have been really helpful with everything. Even your security helps out a lot, patrolling, not just your property, but ours too. So that's a real big help for y'all. I just want to tell y'all I have nothing against it. So, there you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, we'll close it for public comment.
I move to approve, as stated.
I'll second.
Okay, we have an approval and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed with no? That'll be 6-0 on that. We have our director's report, John.
Yeah, just a few items just to mention. One, you all had discussed the issue of bars and separation from churches. We're still researching that.
Yeah.
That'll be coming back to you. We'll also be bringing you an update on signs. We'd mentioned in the past that there was a Supreme Court ruling that affected our sign ordinance. So at some point, we'll be bringing back some changes to our sign ordinance to make it consistent with that Supreme Court decision. Also, just a minor note, today we had a VP case for vision plan amendment. Starting in the new year, those are going to be called comprehensive plan amendments, so CP, comprehensive plan.
Okay.
Not a big deal, but just to avoid confusion. The only other thing I wanted to mention was, I'm sure you probably saw this, but we like to update you on how the city council has acted on items that you've sent to them. And you may have seen that the short-term rentals did get reconsidered, and they approved an ordinance very similar to what you all recommended to them, with a few minor changes, working out a compromise between both sides. But that will go January 17th for a final decision at the city council. They did also on the intermodal containers, the shipping containers, and the accessory structures. They approved those items with some changes. Probably the biggest one on the shipping containers was removing the requirement for the conditional use for those pre-existing ones. Basically, if they are already permitted and out there today, then they're allowed to continue.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, the next regular meeting of the Planning Commission is tentatively scheduled to begin at 9 a.m. on Monday, January 23rd, 2017, in council chambers of the McNeese Convention Center at 501 Rio Concho Drive. And move to adjourn? We don't have to vote on it, do we?